Have you ever felt like God is silent? You've been praying, you've been waiting, but instead of answers, all you hear is silence. Does that mean He's no longer with you? Today, we're going to dive into 3 powerful truths: what God is really doing when He seems silent, how to trust His plan, especially when it doesn't make sense, and why worshiping while you wait can become your greatest weapon. I remember one winter morning not too long ago. I woke up earlier than usual. My heart felt heavy. Work was uncertain. My family was going through a crisis. And the hardest part? I couldn't feel God. I had been praying for weeks, reading scripture every day, waiting for a sign, a breakthrough, anything, but all I got was silence. In that stillness, I began to wonder, am I in the wrong place? Has God forgotten me? Then, one verse gently echoed in my spirit like a quiet whisper. For I know the plans I have for you, plans to give you a future and a hope. Jeremiah chapter 29, verse 11. And in that moment, everything began to shift. Not on the outside, but deep within. When God is silent, it doesn't mean He's absent. There's something deeply unsettling about silence, especially when you've poured your heart out in prayer, only to hear nothing. No confirmation, no open door, no miraculous sign. Just the sound of your own questions echoing in the stillness. But silence doesn't mean absence. Think about a teacher during an exam. They're in the room, watching, present. But they're silent because it's not time for answers, it's time for you to grow. The same is true with God. In Scripture, we see this clearly in the life of Joseph. Betrayed by his brothers, sold into slavery, falsely accused, forgotten in prison. Years went by, and yet there's no record of God speaking directly to him during that time. No visions, no angels, just silence. And yet, God was there the entire time. Every detail of Joseph's pain was part of a divine plan that would one day save an entire nation. What looked like abandonment was actually preparation. Maybe you're in a similar place. You've done everything right, prayed, obeyed, waited, and still, heaven feels quiet. Here's the truth: silence is often the sacred space where trust is built. And maybe, just maybe, God isn't saying nothing. Maybe He's saying, trust me. That shift in perspective changes everything. Instead of asking, where is God? You start to ask, what is He preparing me for? That's when peace begins to rise. Because the God who seemed silent yesterday is the same God who is still writing your story today. And speaking of trust, that leads us perfectly into the next part. How do you hold on when nothing makes sense? How do you trust the process when every step feels confusing? Let's talk about that next. Trust the process, even when it doesn't make sense. One of the hardest things about walking with God is this: His timing rarely matches ours, and His ways, they almost never follow our logic. There are moments in life when you've done everything right. You've prayed, fasted, followed His word, and yet things still fall apart. You lose the job, the relationship ends, the doors close, and you're left standing in the middle of confusion, wondering, why would God allow this? But here's the truth. Faith isn't about understanding every step. Faith is about trusting the one who does. In the book of Genesis, Abraham was told to leave everything he knew, his home, his family, his country, and go to a land God would show him. God didn't hand him a map. He just said, go. Hebrews chapter 11, verse 8. That's what trusting the process looks like. Obeying without all the answers, following without seeing the finish line. I once heard a woman share her story. She was a single mom, raising 2 kids, working 2 jobs, and still barely making it. She prayed for a breakthrough, a promotion, anything. But what came instead was the loss of 1 job. At first, she was devastated, but a few months later, a new door opened. An opportunity that not only paid more, but allowed her to be home with her kids. Looking back, she said, if I hadn't lost that job, I would have missed the life God had for me. You see, what feels like a step backward might actually be the setup for something far greater. The process isn't always pretty. It's often messy, confusing, and slow. But God doesn't waste anything. Not even your delays. Not even your detours. And the beautiful thing is, when we trust the process, we begin to see glimpses of His purpose even in the pain. So, if you're in a season that doesn't make sense, take a deep breath. Remind yourself, God sees more than I can see. He's leading me, even when I don't understand. And that trust, that quiet daily surrender, it's one of the purest forms of worship, which leads us into something powerful. How worshiping while you wait can change everything. Let's explore that next. Worship while you wait. How praise becomes a weapon. Waiting is never easy, especially when the prayers have been prayed, the tears have been cried, and the answers still haven't come. But there's something powerful, something deeply spiritual about choosing to worship in the waiting. Worship isn't just for Sunday mornings or when life feels good. True worship is what happens when we lift our eyes above our circumstances and declare, God, you are still good. Even now. Take Paul and Silas, for example, locked in prison, their feet in chains, their future uncertain. And yet, what did they do? They sang. In the darkest of places, they lifted up praise. And the Bible tells us, in Acts chapter 16, verse 25, that as they worshipped, the foundations of the prison were shaken and the doors flew open. That wasn't just a miracle, it was a lesson. Praise breaks chains. I once spoke to a man who had been waiting for healing, physical, emotional, spiritual, for years. He told me, the moment things began to shift wasn't when the pain stopped. It was when I stopped letting the pain define my posture before God. He started every morning with worship, not because he felt like it, but because he knew that gratitude would guard his heart. Here's the truth. Worship is a weapon, not against people, but against despair, against discouragement, against the lies that whisper, God has forgotten you. When you worship, you remind your soul that God is still worthy, regardless of the outcome. You may not be able to change your situation today, but you can change your spirit within that situation. You can choose to lift your hands, to sing, to declare His promises out loud, because praise isn't a response to what's already happened. Praise is faith in what will happen. So today, if you're waiting, worship. If you're hurting, worship. If you're wondering what's next, worship. And as you do, something begins to shift. Maybe not outside right away, but definitely inside. If this message spoke to your heart today, I invite you to subscribe to ChristGlow Daily. Here, we don't just talk about faith, we walk through it together. Every day, we release messages to uplift your soul, anchor your hope, and remind you, God is still writing your story. And trust me, you don't want to miss what He's about to do next.